explore the world and travel with you. Exploring Africa for the first time, experiencing the unrestrained nature of Zimbabwe for the first time. Looking back on my 15-day trip to southern Africa, it felt like a gluttonous feast. This trip was my first time in Africa. I saw a lot, felt a lot, met a lot of interesting people, and experienced a lot of interesting things. All of these made this trip extraordinary. After about 20 hours of flight, the first night was in Johannesburg, where we met up with travel friends from different countries. And then we flew to Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe the next morning. The endless African grasslands of Zimbabwe finally appeared under my feet, scattered with shrubs, woods and ponds. This reminded me of those African grassland shots in the movie Blood Diamond. They are exactly the same. The airport to Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe is not big. As soon as I got off the plane, I heard the lively rhythmic sound of African drums in the distance, and the ping-dash-pong stamping sound of customs officials in the distance. People immediately felt the enthusiasm of Africa. I also saw young men doing African dance at the airport gate. When we arrived at the hotel, the jeep sent by the park to pick us up for Elephant Back Safari was already waiting there. We immediately jumped on a jeep and drove to the elephant park, on the border of Zimbabwe and Botswana, to start hunting on the backs of elephants. Saw a herd of African buffalo there that day. Although the animals we saw on the first day were not comparable in terms of variety and size to those we encountered later, because it was our first time here and seeing groups of animals for the first time, everyone was very excited. My mount that day was the largest elephant in the park, named Jump, and Jump's rider was named Sam. Sam has been working in the park for 14 years. The current unemployment rate in Zimbabwe is as high as 80%. Once unemployed, it is almost impossible to find another job. Therefore, Sam cherishes this job very much. Sam asked me where I was from. I told him that I was originally from China. He praised me as the Chinese tourist who spoke the best English he had ever encountered. I said, I am now working in the United States and learning to speak Obama's English, which is not as good as his. The Queen UK speaks good English. Sam laughed happily at this. Southern Africa was once a British colony, so the locals speak British English. Before leaving the park, we met Cheetah by chance. This seemingly docile cheetah made everyone come up to take photos with it. However, a few days later, when the cheetah rushed up to our hunting jeep like a rocket, we realized that it is the fastest animal on land, usually reaching speeds of up to 110 to 120 kilometers per hour. We also saw a warthog, an African pig, that day. It was also one of the delicacies at our dinner that night. After returning to the hotel from the park, we went straight to the dinner venue. The traditional African food and game at the dinner left us with unforgettable memories. It seems that crocodile tail, impala, kudu, warthog, etc. Many of the local wild animals that we have not had a chance to meet have become our meals in advance. The music started playing, the gongs and drums beat, and the dinner reached its climax. Under the leadership of the drummer, the guests and hosts played African drums together. The deafening drum beat pushed the dinner to a climax. Everyone came out and danced happily. At this point, our trip to Africa has begun. Exploring Africa for the first time, experience the leap of Victoria Falls here. Speaking of which, on the morning of the second day after arriving in Zimbabwe, the soft morning light shone into my room, and hundreds of birds sang happily outside the house, both far and near. It was a fresh and cheerful morning. Opening the front of the room, I saw a few monkeys playing in the hallway next door. This reminds me of how I slept until midnight last night when I suddenly heard a knock on the balcony. I was wondering, and then there was a series of rapid footsteps. I immediately realized, haha, it was a naughty monkey knocking on the door. Then slip away again. The hotel we stayed in is located in the grassland, and you can see animals on the grassland in every room and every activity area. The hotel's restaurant is located high up, offering a panoramic view of the prairie scenery. Sitting in the restaurant, eating breakfast, and watching the various wild animals coming and going by the pond in the distance. Several areas on this African hunting trip are among the areas where the US CDC recommends taking malaria prevention measures. Due to time constraints before departure, I didn't have time to take vaccinations. So when I got here, I had to wear long sleeves and long pants all day long for fear of mosquito bites. Facing these recreational activities on the grassland, I can only sigh in despair. After breakfast, we drive to Victoria Falls. Maybe this area is a tourist attraction. When I went to Monterey last time, a senior who worked in an African embassy also mentioned that Zimbabwe has always been a popular vacation spot for diplomats from various countries stationed in Africa. I passed some villages and towns along the way, and what I saw and heard was far from the Africa that needs China's assistance in my mind. In my opinion, this place is no worse than the suburbs of Beijing. The world-famous waterfall spectacle Victoria Falls is located in the middle reaches of the Zambezi River, on the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. The local Kalololozi people call Victoria Falls Mosioatunya, which means thunder mist. On November 16, 1855, British explorer David Livingstone arrived at the waterfall and became the first white man to see the waterfall. He named it after the British Queen Victoria. Victoria Falls compared to the other two largest waterfalls in the world. Victoria Falls is larger than Niagara Falls in both height and width, but has a lower average annual flow than Niagara Falls. This is because the flow of Victoria Falls changes significantly with the seasons, with the lowest flow in November every year. British explorer Livingstone first came here in November when the flow was lowest, when the relatively gentle water allowed him to climb to the edge of the cliff with trepidation. In May every year, when we visited, the traffic reaches its highest level, which is 15 times that of November. When we walked into the waterfall, just as Livingstone wrote, nothing can be seen except a white cloud. Victoria Falls is actually divided into 5 sections. They're East Falls, Rainbow Falls, Devil's Falls, Crescent-shaped Horseshoe Falls, and Main Falls. The Zambezi River rolled here, suddenly turned over on the cliff, and fell into a canyon about 107 meters deep, rolling up thousands of piles of snow, thousands of layers of fog, only seeing snow waves rolling, turbulent currents, thousands of thunders roaring, and moving the ground was astonishing, and the splashing white water mist was like pieces of white clouds and light smoke lingering in the sky. The loud noise and flying mist could reach as far as 15 kilometers away. The water vapor from the waterfall reaches a height of more than 300 meters, making the area covered with water mist. As we approached the falls, the foam formed into gusty showers. And even though we were all wearing raincoats, we were soaked to the skin within a few minutes. But far away from the waterfall, the difference in humidity caused by the water mist from the waterfall makes the two seasons distinct within a short distance. Victoria Falls was formed due to a deep rock fracture valley that crosses the Zambezi River. The Rift Valley was caused by crustal movements 150 million years ago. Victoria Falls reaches 1737 meters at its widest point. Opposite the cliff where the river falls is another cliff, only 75 meters apart. Between the two cliffs is a narrow canyon, where the water forms a huge vortex called the Boiling Pot, and then flows down the 72-kilometer-long canyon. These 2 photos were sent to me by fellow travelers a few days ago. On the same day at Victoria Falls, while I was bungee jumping, they chose to take a helicopter up to get a bird's-eye view of the falls and took these photos. When British explorer Livingstone arrived at the waterfall on November 16, 1855, he could see the water vapor stirred by the waterfall from a distance. He boarded a small island on the edge of the waterfall and saw the entire river suddenly disappearing in front of him. Livingstone wrote, "The river seemed to have disappeared from the earth. After only 80 feet, it disappeared on the opposite side, in the crevices of the rocks. I didn't know why, so I climbed to the edge of the cliff tremblingly, and saw a huge canyon, cutting off the 1,000-yard-wide river in the middle, causing the river water to drop 100 feet. And suddenly compressed to only 15 to 20 feet. Yard wide, the entire waterfall from the right bank to the left bank is actually just a crack in the hard basalt, and then stretches from the left bank through 3 to 40 miles of hills. Livingstone later stated that the width and height of the falls had been underestimated. He considered these waterfalls the most magnificent scenery I have ever seen in Africa. Looking for the rainbow, we came to the Victoria Falls Bridge. The Victoria Falls Bridge, which spans Zimbabwe and Zambia, is a famous bungee jumping site. The bungee jumping height is 111 meters, which is more than twice as high as the birthplace of bungee jumping in Queenstown, New Zealand. 43 meters we visited last time. Earlier this year, a female tourist from Australia made headlines when her rope broke during a bungee jump and she fell into the Zambezi River. She later managed to escape from a crocodile. This also gave me the idea of bungee jumping here. I asked the group of more than 40 people if they were interested in bungee jumping together. Only Michael expressed interest, but he still needed to think about it, and it was more of a well-intentioned intimidation. Some mentioned the last bungee jumping accident, and some said that bungee jumping would damage the spine. But I think that precisely because of the last accident, the current bungee jumping system should have just been retested, and it is the safest time. As for bungee jumping, which may damage the spine, although I have never heard of it before, it reminds me of the time when I was a child. I picked up the tail of a water snake upside down and shook its tail so that the snake's spine fell apart and it was unable to crawl. In Lenovo bungee jumping, a rope is tied to the feet. At the end of the free fall, if the person is hung upside down and is subjected to force, will it contusion the spine? At this time, the tour guide recommended another type of bungee jumping to me, gorge swing. Slightly different from bungee jumping, gorge swing uses a rope tied around the waist. Unlike bungee jumping, people will stop moving immediately after completing the free fall. Gorge swing also allows people to use inertia to swing several times in the valley. Sounds good. So, I asked the tour guide to help me book a time for gorge swing in the afternoon. In the afternoon, when I went to the gorge swing site, Michael came to tell me that he had decided not to dance, but he could accompany me to the site if needed. Thinking that Michael graduated from medical school, in addition to helping me take photos at the scene, he could also provide first aid in the event of an accident. So I asked Michael to go to the scene with me, and he readily agreed. The gorge swing site is built in the same gorge as the Victoria Falls Bridge, 120 meters above the water. I originally thought that it would be like in Queenstown, New Zealand, where people were filming and waiting for bungee jumping. I would have the opportunity to observe various jumping methods first. When Michael and I arrived, we found that the place was quiet and I was the only warrior who came. Without the opportunity to observe in advance, I can only imagine the whole process with limited explanations. After bungee jumping, we headed to the Zambezi River to watch the sunset. On the boat, I received a hero's welcome from the entire group. The handicrafts for sale along the way were really cute, and everyone got out of the car to pick them up. The cruise ship cruised on the Zambezi River. We tasted the delicious food while admiring the scenery on both sides of the river, and cheered for the animals that occasionally appeared in front of us from time to time. Saw hippos. I didn't expect it to look so strange, but the Hummer looks more handsome, haha. Finally waited for the sunset on the Zambezi River. The setting sun gradually converged its light and became gentle, like a big red lantern with soft flames, hanging on the edge of the sky. Zimbabwe, Victoria Falls, will remain in my memory forever, exploring Africa for the first time and marveling at the legend of Johannesburg. Johannesburg is the first stop on our trip to Africa. According to the itinerary, we met here with travel friends from different countries on the first night, and continued flying to Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe the next morning. After finishing our tour in Zimbabwe, we returned here to start our tour in South Africa. It was already 9 p.m. when we arrived at Johannesburg Airport on the first night. It was my first time to come to Africa. I had heard that the security situation in Johannesburg was not very good, and I arrived at night, so I was inevitably a little nervous. As soon as I left the lobby, I saw the pickup sign, which made me feel much more at ease. After several travel friends who arrived on the same plane got to know each other, we took the van sent by the tour group to pick us up and headed to the hotel where we were staying. Our vehicle traveled through the city. Even though it was already night, The night scenes on both sides made people feel that this is a modern city full of vitality, exuding an urban atmosphere everywhere. Our hotel is located in a modern business district, and I really like the style of the room. Here everyone compares Naomi Campbell, Audrey Hepburn, which shows that South Africans are proud of their beauties. South Africa has indeed produced many beautiful women. On the way to Kruger National Park, we passed through a small town. This small town alone has produced an Oscar-winning beauty and a new princess in recent years. Can you guess who they are? Johannesburg is South Africa's largest city, with a population of nearly 4 million. Founded in 1886, it was originally just a prospecting station. Later, it rapidly developed into a city with the discovery and mining of gold mines. For over 100 years, the city has been considered one of the most rapidly changing cities in the world. After a rapid increase in population, the influx and outflow of immigrants, and changes in the times, Johannesburg has now become the economic hub of South Africa, the world's largest gold-producing center, and a veritable gold capital. There are more than 60 gold mines in the nearby 240-kilometer stretch, and there are many industrial and mining cities nearby, which together account for about half of South Africa's total industrial output value. Johannesburg is also the world's largest inland port. It is said that there are many Chinese in Johannesburg, mainly engaged in trade, catering, and electrical appliance business. Over the past 100 years, Johannesburg has also produced a world-famous leaders, Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. Gandhi came to Johannesburg in 1893 and returned to India 22 years later in 1915. The years in Johannesburg were the formative period for Gandhi as a social and political activist. Nelson Mandela is a famous human rights leader that the South African people are proud of. He devoted himself to and led the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. Mandela has won more than 100 awards so far, the most notable of which is the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize. The next morning, we drove to Soweto, 25 kilometers southwest of the city, to visit Mandela's former residence. Soweto is the abbreviation of Southwest Township, which is the largest black segregated area in South Africa caused by the apartheid policy. On June 16, 1976, the South African regime committed the horrific Soweto massacre, here rousing angry condemnation from people around the world. In sharp contrast to modern cities, many black people in Soweto still live in matchboxes, tin houses or simple shanties. The living conditions are overcrowded, the houses are poor and basic public facilities are lacking. There are about 1 million residents in Sod, most of whom are workers. Their jobs are in Johannesburg and the surrounding mining areas, and they are forced to commute long distances every day. Poor people who live in groups are happy. They don't have much to lose, and there is no comparison gap, so they can be honest with each other. In order to buy water, we went to a grocery store in Swozwo. When we walked into the store, we felt like we were entering a tiger's den. $1 equals 7 to 8 South African Rand. These should be considered prices in the slums. We have seen the efforts of the South African government to improve the living conditions of black people. Large tracts of affordable housing are going up here. Our tour guide repeatedly warned us not to underestimate the residents here. Many children here have entered good universities, and many black people who have become wealthy are unwilling to leave because they are attached to this community. It was in this red brick bungalow in Soweto that Mandela began his political career leading the anti-apartheid movement. In 1962, a South African court convicted him of conspiracy to overthrow the government. From then on, he left here and began a long 27-year life in prison. After Mandela was released from prison in 1990, he lived here for 3 days before being forced to move out due to media interference. Winnie Mandela, Mandela's second wife. In 1958, Mandela fell in love with the young and beautiful Winnie at first sight and soon got married. In the 1970s and 1980s, Winnie Mandela was a household name in South Africa. Regardless of her personal safety, she stood at the forefront of the anti-racist struggle and supported her imprisoned husband in his fight against the racist regime. At the same time, She hid in Tibet and raised several children with hardships. Winnie, who grew up in the struggle against apartheid, won the love of the majority of Black people with her image of fighting, loyalty, and motherly love. She was once honored as the Black mother in South Africa. But later, Winnie, who had been separated from her husband for too long, slowly changed. As her status continues to improve and her personal prestige gradually expands, the domineering and brutal side of Winnie's character is gradually exposed to the world. Her political views became radical, she advocated violence, her life became corrupt, and she even had extramarital affairs. After Mandela was released from prison, he originally thought he could reunite with his wife, but found that the South African press was full of scandals about Winnie. Mandela painfully confessed that since his release from prison, he had become the loneliest man in the world while living with Winnie. In 1996, Mandela and Winnie divorced. When I asked the tour guide at my old residence to confirm the reasons for the divorce, the fall of the mother of the country was probably the most distressing one. The tour guide looked frustrated and refused to answer my question. On July 18, 1998, Mandela's 80th birthday, 53-year-old Graça Machel, the widow of former Mozambican President Marshall, became Mandela's bride. This woman who married two sitting presidents in her lifetime made us very curious. Everyone took out their mobile phones and Googled photos of Graça Machel on the spot. It seems that wisdom and cultivation are the eternal charm of women. Fluent in Portuguese, German, French, Spanish and English, intelligent and ambitious, Graça was one of the few African women educated during colonialism and received a diploma from the University of Lisbon. After Mozambique became independent, she was the only woman to hold ministerial positions during the first 11 years of the Frelimo government. In September 1975, she married Samora Moises Marshall, leader of Frelimo and president of Mozambique. In October 1986, Samora Marshall died in a plane crash in South Africa. The South African people did not obliterate Winnie's due status because of the late fall of the motherland. Her photos still have a prominent position in her old home. Photos of Mandela with his ex-wife and children were also seen. Mandela served 27 years in prison, most of which he spent on Robben Island. This is the Robben Island in the distance that we took when we visited Table Bay in Cape Town. On the way to Cape Town, Wineland, we were fortunate enough to unexpectedly visit Groot Drakenstein Prison, a famous prison in South Africa, where Mandela spent his last 18 months in prison and walked towards freedom. Here is the Mandela Walk to Freedom statue outside the prison gate. Surrounded by enchanting mountains and orchards, it is hard to believe that this is a maximum security prison. We drove to the end of the prison, and a pink bungalow appeared in front of us. This is where Mandela lived in prison. Next to the pink bungalow is a white bungalow, which was used as an office to monitor Mandela's activities. We entered this single-family house with 4 bedrooms through the side door. This was a building from the 1980s, and its design and decoration should be considered superior at the time. The house has a kitchen, living room, dining room, master bedroom, and BBQ facilities in the backyard. After visiting the Groot Drakenstein prison, I suddenly came up with the idea of visiting the Qinsheng prison in China. When I had the opportunity to learn about the prison life of Chinese political prisoners, exploring Africa for the first time, seeing the surprise of Lion Park. The big 5 of South Africa's animals are lions, leopards, buffaloes, rhinos, and elephants. They are the 5 animals that South Africa is proud of. The currency of South Africa has patterns of these 5 animals. One of the goals of our trip to South Africa is to go to the Kruger National Park to look for traces of the big 5 animals. I have seen some safari pictures and videos before, and the adventure I look forward to the most is driving an open-top Jeep on the African savanna. Watching the wildest and most magnificent natural picture under the sunset is the elephant running in herds towards the water source. Giraffes sleep with their necks crossed lovingly. Lions lie lazily under the trees, watching for prey in the distance. Antelopes graze leisurely, unaware of the danger, thinking that we will go to Kruger National Park in 2 days and experience such an experience. You can imagine our excitement. The afternoon before leaving Johannesburg for Kruger, we did a safari drive at the local lion park to warm up for the Kruger safari. Unexpectedly, we had an unexpected surprise. Unlike the imaginary open-top Jeep, Lion Park's safari vehicle is fully enclosed. Sitting in the car is a bit like being locked in a cage. I can't help but wonder, are we going to see the animals? Or are the animals looking at us? The car was galloping in the park, and everyone cheered after a while. It turned out that 100 meters away, a group of antelope Spilsbok were strolling by the pond. Continuing forward, a group of zebras were grazing leisurely in the distance. When they heard the sound of car engines, they stood up alertly and tilted their heads to look this way. They looked at us for a while, then lowered their heads as if nothing had happened. We continued to enjoy the food, and our charming and naive attitude made us laugh. It is said that zebras are not afraid of lions at all. Even in front of lions, they can still stroll around as if nothing has happened. Does anyone know why this is? I saw the clever springbok, the honest black wildebeest, and the wild dog. SHHH. Look at a group of lions taking a nap in the distance. The legendary and precious African white lion. The cheetah in the distance was awakened by our vehicle and raised its head in surprise. Suddenly it stood up and rushed toward our vehicle like an arrow. Fortunately, our vehicle was fully enclosed. After rushing onto the roof of the vehicle, the cheetah clawed at it with its paws. In the end, it had no way to get in, so it had to give up in frustration. This sudden thing in front of them shocked everyone. The calm driver explained to everyone, cheetahs are the fastest animals on land, reaching speeds of 110 to 120 kilometers per hour. It is precisely because there are many agile carnivores in the park that, for the safety of tourists, the park's safari vehicles are fully enclosed. After finishing the safari drive, we came to the cub park. While the other lion cubs were walking away, I couldn't help but step forward to say hello. As a result, we encountered another thrilling incident. If you can't afford to offend, can you still afford to hide? You've learned your lesson. I'll just stand aside and watch this time. After leaving the Lion Cub Park, I met two tourists who were scratched by lion cubs. Haha, even though they were injured, they were still proud. At the entrance of the park, children are communicating with giraffes. An ostrich. Look how cool it is to buy a bracelet made of ostrich eggshells and take it back as a souvenir. The glorious image of me teasing the lion was captured by the park photographer, and a caption was added, which was shown back and forth on the park's video. Haha, buy it for 20 rand. Everyone will be happy.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.